да вас поздравим на sastanku srpskih i ruskih ustavnih pravnika. Dear colleagues, it's a great honor for me to open our scientific meeting. I hope that this meeting will be an inspiring beginning of our fruitful academic in near future. And now the floor is given to Head of Department of Public Law, Judge of Constitutional Court of Serbia, member of the Venice Commission and Council of Europe, Professor Dr. Vladan Petrov. Some words for us for start. It will be beautiful.
My dear friend, sorry, we have some problem with it. My dear friends and constitutional lawyer colleagues, I am very happy and honored to be with you in this, I can say, Corona style version of scientific conference, unfortunately. But I hope that we will today make a good step forwards to our closer and fruitful and long-lasting cooperation, which will produce, I strongly believe, one very good and serious scientific conference, maybe here in Belgrade or in Moscow, maybe in 2025. So today we are gathered together to, in a way, try to make this first step. And I think that this topic is very important because it is enough wide to make some possibilities for us to give some of our best interests in constitutional law. But I really believe that we will in 2025 be in the opportunity to make a real in vivo conference, which will result in a good and seriously scientific collection of papers. I would like to, and I hope that you will not be. I would like to make this opportunity to stress once again that the cooperation with Lomonosov is not only a great honor for us, it is a real sign of honest friendship, which I hope will last forever between our two people, Russian and Serbian people. Thank you very much.
So, thank you for your inspiring words. And I think that now the floor is given to our PhD, Alexander Arikovich, She now tell us about the theme of your presentation. But some words now will say Igor Kramarenko.
Thank you, dear Irina Pavlovna, dear colleagues. I'm a great student in the Faculty of Law of Moscow State University, Kramarenko Igor. But now, thanks to the bilateral agreement between our faculties, the student exchange program, I'm studying in the Faculty of Law of University of Belgrade. I would like to take this moment to thank the Faculty of Law of University of Belgrade so the opportunity to participate to other scientific events such as Pravniada and Forum Romanium, as well as the professor of the Department of Public Law for knowledge transfer during the study process. Russia and Serbia as a states with a socialist past understand very well what challenges to modern constitutionalism are, as evidenced by the recent changes in the constitutionalism of our countries. Contemporary challenges of constitutionalism is scientific events, inspired by sincere feeling towards Russia and Serbia, the great mutual interest of the constitutionalism of our countries, and the hope for further deepening of cooperation between the Faculty of Law of University of Belgrade and the Faculty of Law of Moscow State University. Thank you for giving me the floor.
Very much for your beautiful words. And now we wait Alexander Aripovich.
Wait, please. The professor Lina Krishtianin wants to say something.
Yes, thank you.
Of your time. Добрый день, уважаемые профессора, дорогие коллеги, дорогие друзья. Я очень рада каждый раз, когда мы организуем что-то совместно с коллегами из России, особенно с таким уважаемым факультетом, как юридический факультет МГУ. Since English is the official language, I'll continue in English for all the colleagues' sakes. It is my great pleasure to greet the conference as the Vice Dean for Scientific Work of the University of Belgrade Faculty of Law, and to convey the greetings of our Dean, Professor Zoran Mirkovic, who unfortunately could not join us today. I am very glad that there are cooperations in place between Serbian and Russian faculties. I am very glad that this conference is taking place, and particularly glad to hear for plans of a bigger conference next year, regardless of whether it takes place in person, which of course would be preferable. We would like to see you in person and to shake your hands. But even if we continue in this online mode, which is more convenient and cheaper for everyone, I think it is important to have regular meetings, regular exchange of academic opinions. And with that in mind, I think that today's topic is particularly important because constitutional law is facing, and public law in general is facing, many challenges in the contemporary world. And maybe we see a single model being forced down on everyone from some Western countries that I don't think is the only possible model. So I am very glad that different opinions will be heard today. Unfortunately, I won't be able to stay now to listen to you because I have a meeting to go to. But if I finish before the conference finishes, I might log in again to hear the remaining papers. And either way, I wish you successful work and all the best.
Nina, and we are very glad to hear your beautiful voice. I think that we start now meeting from presentation of Alexandra. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, dear colleagues. Tell me, please, do you hear me? Is it everything okay with the sound? Okay, thank you so much. I will be very grateful if you help me with the presentation. Thank you so much. I have a very difficult task to say some greeting words after such an impressive greeting words that has been said. But nevertheless, I will start with to say thank you for the invitation and for the possibility to take part in such a conference. And I wish all of us had a fruitful discussion today, very fruitful meeting. I have an interesting topic about challenges of digitalization era, and it contains the rather difficult theme of the right to privacy in digital era. But first of all, let me introduce myself.
Это листать.
Вот так?
У вас PDF просто.
Да, но его можно развернуть на весь экран, и тогда просто нажимать. Там есть такая. Спасибо. Sorry, dear colleagues, some digital technical problems. So let me introduce myself. My name is Orikhovich Alexandra, and I'm the head of the department in Internet Initiative Development Fund. It's a venture fund that deals only and just with digital startups. So more or less, without illusory modesty, I know a lot about digital challenges. But here and now, I'm presenting not just a lawyer, and I'm presenting not just a representative of a venture fund that deals with startups, but I'm presenting here also as a regular customer. A regular customer that faces digital challenges every day in my day-to-day activities. I wake up in the morning, I'm scrolling the news via social media, I'm putting on my tracking watches, I'm ordering the breakfast via digital delivery, I'm ordering taxi, scrolling news again. So in my day-to-day life, I feel that my digital privacy is somehow violated. And my private life becomes rather obvious for data brokers and data operators. But can we somehow in digital era avoid such a problem, avoid such a violation of our privacy in our day-to-day life, or it's absolutely impossible? Look at this smiling face. This is a woman who succeeded in hiding some facts of her private life. And she made an experiment of preserving her privacy in digital sphere. And she succeeded. She was not the first one. She's a journalist of Financial Times. And she has made a research of how long she could hide her pregnancy from social media and from data brokers. As I said, she was not the first one. Her predecessor, Janet Fertesi, has made the same experiment about 10 years ago, and she also succeeded. But what was the cost and what was the price? It was really enormous, high personal costs. For instance, the predecessor of Gia Tolentino, Janet Fertesi, while doing these experiments, she had to erase her own father from her Facebook list of friends Facebook list, because he asked her a question about her state of health, while she was trying to hide her development of the state of health from social media. Can you please switch off the sound now? Thank you so much. So the second one, I mean, Jill Tolentino, had less restrictions, but she stopped the experiments after 4 months. after she has consultations with the data expert, and she confirmed that Gia succeeded in this experiment. And Gia said, it's very valuable detail. She said, after 4 months, I congratulated myself by instantly dropping the experiment and buying maternity pants. Ads for baby carriers popped up on my Instagram within minutes. So only some minutes took data brokers to realize that Gia now is not just a person. Gia now is a very valuable product. Because as it said, and it's a very famous phrase, if you are not buying for the product, then you are the product. And as all experts said, identifying a single pregnant woman is as valuable to data brokers as knowing the age, gender, location of more than 200 non-pregnant people. Why? Because one pregnant woman is much more valuable product because she buys much more. But it's a very tricky question. So we are becoming a product, producing our own data. It's our data, but we do not own this data. Data brokers, data operators, controllers, they are those who control and who own our own data. And they are those who can violate our privacy. But it's not even so much bad. The worst thing now is that not only data becomes a subject of a purchase and selling, but our own privacy becomes the product of selling. Because, for instance, some companies go a step further. They do not just sell our data. They take our data and sell to us our own privacy. For instance, very big, huge, I would say, Russian mobile operator announced the launching of a new app offering privacy to his customers. So you can, for a monthly fee for 2,000 rubles per month, buy from mobile operator who owns your own personal data, buy your own privacy. You can, it's provided network privacy, some protection from phishing sites, and built-in firewall. So it's very interesting episode when our privacy is not only violated by people, by companies who really own it, but our privacy has been sold to us, so we can buy our own privacy. However, we are the natural owners of it. However, even this is very doubtful. Even the possibility of operators to protect and to preserve our privacy is very doubtful to realize, because even the official representative of official government says that the only data that will not leak is the data that no one has provided. So the only way of not being known about is not to provide your data to anyone. Is it possible in the digital era? I think it's very doubtful, and the previous example prove it, because it's very difficult to hide something from social media for data operators, even for 4, 3, 5 months. But let's investigate whether it's possible somehow, whether there are legislative means to somehow preserve our privacy. Let's start from the beginning. Let's start from the terminology. The right to privacy is enshrined in the Russian Constitution. It's very obvious. It's okay, but what is privacy as such? Here we can observe some kind of rulings of the Constitutional Court in the Russian Federation, and we can conclude that privacy as such is provided and guaranteed by the state possibility to control the information about the person himself and to prevent anyone from disclosure of their intimate information. So what is really important in this term and this definition, that the core principle of privacy is that the individual is able and should control the information about himself by himself. So he should control, he should prevent, and he should preserve this information by himself. But is it now actual, due to the ways of digitalization, due to the development of digitalization, where we cannot really control who and how owns and collects at that moment our own personal data? I think it's not. That's why the lack of transparency about data and usage practices makes it not just difficult, makes it absolutely impossible to understand the extent of collection of data, to understand where the data now is used and by whom it is used. And that's why it's absolutely impossible to prevent someone from disclosure of your own information. Moreover, Russia, like many other countries, like most of the countries, does not have a unified legal framework about privacy, doesn't have unified legal framework about digital rights and compliance of these rights. Okay. For instance, in Kyrgyzstan, there now is announced the, or it is now adopted, or just announced an adoption of so-called digital code. And this is a really unified legal framework, especially addressing to digital life. But no one except Kyrgyzstan has done it for now, and neither did Russia. So Russia possesses now a patchwork of laws and regulations. Among them are civil code, law on personal data, law on information, criminal code, and so on and so forth. But all of this regulations, all of this patchwork of regulations cannot really keep in pace with the development of digitalization, with the pace of digitalization now. So what do we face? We face this problem, this phase that I told previously, that the core principles, they tell us about something that have no deal with digitalization, that now are not actual for real moment. And that's why the core principles cannot really defend and protect the person's right, the individual's right about his own privacy. So, as I said, the rapid pace of technological change outpaces the ability of lawmakers to effectively regulate the digital landscape. I have two examples. The first example about the definition. For instance, we do have the law on personal data, which defines the definition personal data. And it is absolutely goes in line with the Convention 108, and it says that personal data means any information relating to an identified or identifiable individual, but nothing more after that. So there was no detailed information about, for instance, what exactly is included now in our digital era in the word personal data. it really violates so much the right of a person, because, for instance, we even do not know, even for now, whether cookies can be regarded as personal data. There are no detailed description, like, for instance, as it is in European regulation. The another example is about pseudonymization. Pseudonymization is a very, very widespread term that means that it is something rather personal that could be attributed to a natural person by the use of additional information. And that's why it should be regarded as a personal information. But the definition and legal nature in our codes, neither in our codes nor anywhere in regulation, are intrigued. So what it causes to? It causes to not just the words that people feel they are violated, their privacy is violated, but it's not just a feeling, it's a fact, because there are enormous facts that pseudo-anonymized data was the subject of purchase and selling. Just imagine data, enormous volumes of data that can be attributed to a natural person, to all of us, is bought and is purchased now on the market rather freely. So what can be done somehow to improve the situation? Of course, it's not just it's not just a problem of legislation. First of all, we should start from the beginning, from the individuals, from the real owners of their data, and from the real owners of their privacy. Of course, the educated of the engineer, of the individuals is very important, but what is more important is empowering of individuals, giving them a real mechanisms of control and preventing and preserving their data. And this is, of course, the main topic, should be the main topic of adaptive legislation. I'm not the very big fan of the idea of digital code. And I think really that patchwork regulation in this point of view is more beneficial and could be more productive. That's why I think that we should have really adaptive legislation not on the code level. It should be rather flexible legislation on the level, maybe on the level of government, that could give special mechanisms to the individual to control of what is going on with the data he owns. And I think it's the only way to somehow flexible legislation in digital era is the only way to give to an individual any kind of mechanisms to preserve his privacy. Or we can just think about changing our attitude to privacy, because privacy as such is a rather young term. It's rather a young definition. It was first, I think, developed in 19th century. And first of all, it was regarded as the right to be left alone, and nothing more about private intimate information, about owners of this information, nothing, just right to be left alone. And maybe we can possess it any time, even without any adaptive legislation. Maybe it's time to somehow think about it in this way also. In case you do have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask me. I will be very happy.
Thank you for your excellent presentation. I hope that our colleagues can ask Alexandra. Have you some questions? Dear colleagues,
We can proceed. Without question for now.
Все понятно. Если есть вопросы, значит, все понятно.
dear colleagues, the duration of each presentation shall not exceed 15 minutes. I hope that this time frame. What? I asked you, Елена Марковна. Huh? Please, we hear you.
Sorry, can you hear us?
George Markovich.
Yes, we do hear you.
Okay. We don't have questions for now here in this room.
But maybe later.
Maybe later, of course. Thank you very much for your presentation.
So are you about to present now, or are you waiting for the presentation from our side?
Okay. Do you want to present someone from here? Okay. Then Professor Vladan Petrov can, of course.
Of course.
Okay. Then Professor Vladan Petrov. Sorry. We thought that maybe you will present first and then us, but it is okay for us.
Should I stay here or?
No, you need to come here. Professor Vladan Petrov will now take the floor. Thank you.
One second. Again, thank you. Okay, we unfortunately have some technical problems, but we will get the routine after some time, after a while. So my topic is logically related to the organization which I am the member in front of Serbia, representing Serbia. It's the Venice Commission. The Venice Commission as a factor of internationalization of constitutional law. The Venice Commission, with its seat in Venice, in Scuola Grande San Giovanni Evangelista, was created in 1990 as an international project, which was doomed a success. In the years of great legal and social political changes that came with the fall of the real socialist bloc, one of the Commission's original tasks was to find a common constitutional denominator for practically all European states that had or aspired to have a democratic political order. The Venice Commission developed the concept of European constitutional heritage based on democracy, human rights, and the rule of law, and also became one of the creators of transnational constitutional law. According to Sergio Bartole, the European constitutional heritage is, quotation, a yardstick in the elaboration of the Venice Commission opinions. The end of the quotation. That is why the idea of European heritage, which has its basis the tradition of Roman law, the legacy of Greek policy and Christianity of the Middle Ages. Tvori explains that the language of heritage, tradition, and identity was not an obvious choice for the justification of European integration. This language had been employed in conservative arguments against Nazi laws. However, in the emerging European integration, which itself was a supranational revolution of sorts, this idea of the role of tradition as a guide towards the future was less obvious. Legal history, human rights, and European integration coalesced around a single narrative of European tradition. The notions of European heritage and shared legal traditions were not only becoming features that could be used to define Europe, but also who should be considered European, the end of the quotation. The European constitutional heritage is understood as a system of principles and values of Western European constitutionalism of the 18th and 19th centuries. Bartole says, quotation, the peculiar institutions and unpredicted achievements of the ancient constitutional systems of the Central and Eastern European countries have impressive characters for scholars exploring their development. They are not studied as a part of the European common constitutional heritage. Their experience is not considered by the majority of scholars to be a constituent element of the European constitutional tradition. This is surprising, as the Hungarian Balaurea is a very ancient constitutional document. The impression is that only liberal democratic states that have been successfully established for a long time are considered as adequate terms of reference for modern constitutionalism in the elaboration of the European constitutional heritage. The end of the quotation. Although the Venice Commission is often referred to as an independent consultative body, it has a specific legal status. If I can say, in the words of the Serbian constitution related to Kosovo and Metohija status, it is a kind of substantial autonomy in relation to the Council of Europe itself. The Commission was formed by the decision of the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe in 1990, and the normative basis of the Commission is the Statute of 2002 and two other legal documents, the Rules of Procedure and Principles of Conduct. The Venice Commission became an almost equal, although the Commission was primarily created out of the need to help the countries of Eastern and Central Europe, it became an almost equal need in the Western democracies, not only for the promotion of democracy through law, but also for finding the unifying principles of the future European political community. The future of the Commission is largely determined by finding a way out of the political and all-encompassing crisis of the European community, European Union, precisely, but also of a global crisis of the inter- and supranational rule of law. And I will tell you something about the VC opinions, which are definitely documents between law and politics. Unfortunately, we know about that. We have to be honest. Sometimes, or more often, they are closer to politics than to law. But the VC issued country-specific opinions at the invitation of the bodies of states whose acts are being analyzed, or on the initiative of bodies of the Council of Europe and other international organizations. When the state addresses the Commission, it may do so for various reasons: to seek an expert opinion on the quality of its proposed legislation, to invoke the authority of the opinion of the Commission as one of the instruments solving internal political dilemmas and conflicts, in order to harmonize national legislation in the most adequate possible way with international standards, etc. Before the plenary session, the draft opinion is being discussed in the corresponding subcommittee. State representatives and rapporteurs can also meet the day before the plenary session in order to agree some details in the draft opinion. The opinion is adopted at the plenary session by the votes of the majority of the members, provided that the majority of the members of the Commission are present. However, the rule is that opinions are adopted by consensus. That democratic rule, I think, is a civilizational standard which should be followed in all international organizations. But unfortunately, as we know, it is not the case, or always the case. Operability and flexibility as important features of the Venice Commission methodology created the need for a special type of opinion, which is somewhat different from ordinary opinions. Those are urgent opinions, which are issued in exceptional cases. The number of such opinions has increased over time so that they no longer represent an exception. Their common denominator is the necessity for the Commission to declare its views and recommendations regarding a text without waiting for the next plenary session. An urgent opinion shall be submitted at the next session. The VC may firstly take note of the urgent opinion, secondly endorse the urgent opinion, thirdly adopt an ordinary opinion based on the urgent opinion, or fourthly decide to postpone consideration of the opinion to a forthcoming session. Another type of opinion, which can be used in practice for many years but became a statutory category only recently, is follow-up opinion. Whenever there are new developments concerning an adopted opinion, the Secretariat will report to the plenary session under the agenda item follow up to previous opinions. The practice has also produced interim opinions when the Commission considers that its assessment of the topic requires further developments. Bearing in mind that the process is ongoing, the Commission should not take its final position on the issue. Quotation: formally speaking, the Commission is an advisory body, and the recommendations expressed in its opinions are just that, recommendations which are not legally binding upon authorities to which they are addressed. The end of the quotation. Granata Menghini and Martin Chieri. The absence of legal sanctions is the first soft spot in the Venice Commission methodology. Another soft spot is the absence of an effective monitoring mechanisms for compliance, i.e. the implementation of its opinions. The third soft spot is the impossibility to measure the impact of the opinions. The Venice Commission, according to the words of Granata Menghini, its director general, brings technical and legal argumentation to the political debate, but remains to the greatest extent possible outside the political forum. I think that it is more a standard or even an ideal situation. Unfortunately, and I can also witness that the Venice Commission sometimes brings very close to politics, and it is something which is unfortunately one of the most challenging problems in the future work of the Venice Commission, especially in the world which is reforming, which is not in the 90s of the 20th century. And the opinions is formally not political documents. They are drafted using predominantly legal argumentation, or usually predominantly legal argumentation. The time frame is very important also. It often does not favor the quality of opinions. The opinions are neither abstract nor general documents. I can also witness that usually the authors of the opinions, i.e. the rapporteurs, come from the Western European countries and from the very small circle of professionals who are related to the Venice Commission and the Council of Europe for a very long period of time. So very many members of the Venice Commission do not even have an opportunity to participate in writing the opinion during during their mandate, for which lasts for 4 years, and that is something which is also, I think, a substantial problem in the working methodology of the Venice Commission. It should be more democratic and more open to those experts which belong to, in a way, different legal tradition. It is possible to talk about 3 dimensions of the Commission's impact on the legal order of a given country. The first is quantitative, the second is qualitative, and the third concerns follow-up in the true sense. The quantitative dimension refers to the volume of adopted recommendations, ultimately to the question if legislation has been changed at all. The qualitative dimension of impact refers to the quality of the amendments, more precisely to the extent and the way the recommendations from the opinion are implemented in the final text of the Constitution or the law. The Commission can at least have information and present it as a classic follow-up at the next plenary session. And that follow-up is a summary report about which recommendations from the opinion were followed and which are not, or which are partially followed. The third dimension of impact refers to the question of whether the adopted legislation amendments are implemented and applied. That impact of the Commission almost never exists because the Commission is not even in charge of dealing with it. And in conclusion, the basic idea of constitutional law as a prohibition for the excessive influence of any, even international, legal or political factor in the constitutional redesign of a nation state remains one of the guidelines in the work of the Commission. I will stress again, one of the main points of reference, but not the points in the practice. Unfortunately, Venice Commission sometimes cannot escape from its political or quasi-political involvement when doing its job. And some words about the VC in the future, the challenges of the rule of law. The central question is whether the Commission will and can maintain its professional relevance, referentiality and operability in a world that will one day be reborn, when cataclysmic attacks on the traditional concept of international legal order and the rule of law go to an end. It should not be forgotten, after all, that the Venice Commission was created as an institutional realization of a humanistic and very right idea of national legal orders that rest on common supranational principles of the rule of law. At this point, I would like to mention only one challenge that the Commission should pay special attention to this challenge in the coming period. It is re-examination of one of its traditional views on the division into old and new democracies. That division, apparently justified in the 90s, is today, objectively speaking, quite far from the reality of most member states of the Euro. In general, many once new democracies have become stable. They are established and function on generally accepted European standards. Many so-called old democracies are not stable as they once were or assumed they were. The rule of law is facing new challenges everywhere. Those challenges do not recognize the difference between old and new democracies. About half a century of authoritarian constitutionalism, however, cannot be enough to completely erase the legal, constitutional, cultural legacy of Eastern and Western Europe. If such an approach was justified at the turn of the 20th and 21st centuries, while the former real social states were in the process of transition, today it must be replaced by a far more balanced approach, which does not view Central and Eastern Europe only as students, but also as guardians of the European constitutional and legal heritage in general. A true Europe must be whole in its diversity. In the true sense, it must rest on the old federal principle of unity in diversity, understood in a modern and realistic way. This means that there should be not only Western European values as primary and some others as secondary and marginal. Differences, especially cultural ones, must be on equal footing. There should not be culturally large and culturally small states, culturally large and culturally small nations, nor should the division between large Western European stable democracy and small Central European and Eastern European democracies, which are young and unstable, should continue. This is neither the 50s nor the 90s of the last century. This is largely the third decade of the 21st century, in which many problems of European democracies are common. Crisis of legitimacy, alienation from the sovereignty of people or citizens at the expense of technocratic and financial elites of large states and supranational creations or organizations. If Europe does not unite while respecting its differences, it not only has no future, it will very quickly, unfortunately, become the past. Thank you. And I am open to all the questions.
Any other question?
Yeah, I do have one.
Vasilis Gredinov, postgraduate student of Moscow University.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
And for the interesting reports, I have two questions, basically. So the first one relates to the rule of law idea. In the recent couple of years ago, the European Court came up with a decision on Hungarian and Polish cases. And so, among other things, the court was talking about the constitutional identity which belongs to the EU in contrast to member states called Poland and Hungary. So, do you see this decision as or the concept with that made by the court as problematic? Because from my point of view, or like some scholars argue that in this case, European Court offered, so basically places the EU above the law while giving the EU the opportunity to judge other legal orders within the Union. If I was.
Can you please repeat the last sentence? So just in summary, your question is, what is my opinion about this attitude of the European Court towards those two countries?
Yes,
I cannot say exactly that the cases of Poland and Hungary is exactly of the same nature, but in general, I accept the position of primacy of the national concept of the rule of law. It should be interpreted more open and we should not be so rigid. On the other hand, I think that those centralistic tendencies in the European Union are not good for the future of the European Union. And I think that those countries which are relatively strong political and legal tradition feel that something is really wrong in the European Union. So I cannot say that Hungary and Poland are always right in their attitude towards the law of the European Union, but in general, national constitutional identity must prevail in relation to the European constitutional identity, especially because European constitutional identity is unfortunately an abstract category, which is not formed yet, in my opinion. So that's it in general. That's it in general. To analyze those decision of the European Constitutional of the European Court should take more time, and that is something which can be the topic of the separate meeting. Thank you.
I have another question, please.
And the second question, I didn't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
More loudly.
Okay. I heard you. I heard you.
So you were talking about the cultural traits of Eastern European countries, which would be preserved and be evident on the European level, as well as Western member states' cultural traits. Also, you were talking about the preserving constitutional identity of national states as well. But simultaneously, you mentioned the lack of democracy, the direct democracy on the European level, and the crisis of direct democracy within the EU. So do you think these two ideas are contradictory, and to put more weight on one another, you should, forget another one?
Sorry, I didn't hear you. What two ideas are contradictory? What two ideas precisely?
The first one is identity of member states. And the second one, the idea of lack of direct democracy within the EU on the European level. So how we can preserve the national identity and give, at the same time, more democratic power to the EU?
More democratic power to the EU can be given only by safeguarding exactly the national values, because if the citizens from the member states don't feel the European Union as a democratic institution, as a democratic organization, we cannot have the future in the European Union. I don't think that it is incompatible, because more democracy in the European Union means, in my point of view, more participation of the citizens of the EU countries, EU member states, in the institutions of the EU. It is a very complex task. I cannot say what is the answer. I only want to stress that it is the only way to maybe I'm not very optimistic. I must say that to find a solution for the future European Union. Because if you don't have a democratic institution in the EU, it means that you don't respect the democracy even in the member states. If the citizens of the member states are not in a willingness and in a capacity to participate in the institutions of the EU more directly than it is now, then the EU is just a bureaucratic and allianized institutional structure. So I don't have an answer. If I would have an answer, I would probably be an ideological reformer of the EU. I just want to say that the more democracy for the EU is the only way for preserving the EU. But I am not very optimistic about this, and I don't think that it is even possible, because honestly, I think that there is something very, very undemocratic in the nature of this organization. So in conclusion, in a way, I can agree with your first statement.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And now Igor Kramarenko help you to understand some organization of next clause. Я тут сейчас объясню.
Yeah, and then the next one, I think, must to be Elena Markova, and now I can stay in the faculty of the grade the change of this situation.
Igor, now now the
In Russian,
Elena Markova, and
Russian
then
professors and
our side,
Serbian.
our side, then Serbian.
I can hear.
Yes,
What did you say?
then Serbian.
I understand. Okay,
As a program wrote, okay?
I understand.
Thank you.
Elena Markova.
Сейчас.
Наставить звук и выключить микрофон.
Лучше микрофон у себя включить, потому что здесь...
PhD on faculty.
Okay. Zdravo, my dear colleagues in Belgrade and in Moscow. I'm very happy to be here and to present my paper at our roundtable. And I would like to join to all greetings my colleagues have said. And I think both our nations have a lot of common. And if it's pretty obvious, if you look at my surname and the surname of the next speaker, Georgi Markovich, I think it explains a lot. We have probably many things a lot in common. So today I would like to continue the topic of the problems of digital technology from public law perspective. And I would like to talk about current issues and current trends and the problems we are discussing in Russia concerning e-democracy, digital democracy in Russia. So the topic of my today presentation is digital democracy in Russia, myth and reality. My presentation would be divided into 3 parts, and I would like to start with the first one, with the first episode, and I would rather call it e-petition is the dead soul of our democracy. So actually, we started to talk about digital technology and as a means of democracy, as a means of direct democracy about 10 years ago. And it all started, I think, with a new opportunity and to uh, that was introduced by Russian President Vladimir Putin, and who wrote an article and invented that we need to provide the active right to enable citizens themselves to shape the legislative agenda, to put forward the projects, and to formulate priorities. So it was the beginning of the e-democracy in Russia, I guess, and we got 2 presidential decrees. And according to these decrees, we got a so-called e-petition that has the title in Russia as Russian public initiative. And the Russian public initiatives are considered to be Russian citizens' offers, proposals on the social economic development, improvement of state and municipal management, and that are made with the usage of the internet resource online platform, a special organized for that. So actually there were some preconditions for implementation of these e-petitions. Of course, we Russian citizens also used private online platforms. I think some of the platforms are familiar for you also, as the change.org and openpetitions.eu. And it was obvious that there is public demand for this kind of digital tool, online tool, and it was an increased amount of citizens that were ready to participate in managing state affairs. And actually, e-petitions can improve political participation a lot. So the idea was pretty great, and we look forward for that implementation. However, and now I'm coming to explaining why is it at this so right now. However, all the good efforts were placed, but in reality, in practice, it doesn't come as an efficient instrument. So as to explain what it actually means, the e-petition is pretty simple in Russia. You have to be registered in state identification system to provide the principle of one person, one vote. You have to go to this site, the official site, and you can write whenever proposal you would like to introduce. And within 1 year, every Russian citizen above 18 years old can vote for or against this kind of petition. And actually, it looks like a very nice and a cool idea to have a direct conversation and a form to an attempt to influence on the government. But actually, if you look at the next stage, you will notice that the e-petition is not going straight to the table on the deputies, on the member of the parliament or the executive authorities, but there is another stage, and the stage when the e-petition goes to the expert groups. And actually, this the key problem for the efficient of these petitions, because if you would check the main results, and here is some statistics of the Russian public initiatives for the last 10 years. Actually, only 2 initiatives have been implemented, have its positive value. And it's pretty much interesting to discuss why it's the case. I think the first problem is that actually the government is not interested in popularization of this instrument. If you ask Russian citizens on the street, do they know about such an opportunity? Probably 99% would answer no. We haven't heard about that, and that's the first problem, non-legislative one. And actually, the second problem is actually this kind of expert board expert commission who actually prefer to decline all the petitions, and two initiatives have been implemented in positive way. And if you look at the content of the petition, you would notice they are not any kind of political issue. They are of social nature. And one of the so-called petition was, for example, the projects of foster deforestation. This is the green shield around Moscow. And of course, nobody everybody is for this kind of initiative, and the government agreed to implement. So now I would like to go to the next issue, and the second episode of my paper I would rather call is like digital Potemkin villages. Digital Potemkin villages is an expression in Russia we use to explain some construction or fake facade with an only purpose to make people believe that actually it's better than it is. So I would give you two examples we have in Moscow on the regional and municipal level, and I will talk a little bit about e-surveys and or questionnaires and online public hearings. So first of all, in Russia, there is a so-called official online service that called Active Citizen, and actually all the citizens who live in Moscow, I think they get about 3 to 5 emails per week that encourage everybody to vote and for some questionnaire. And actually it was made as a large-scale city website of electronic consultative, not compulsory referendums. And with the help of these online questionnaires, the citizens decide, for example, which urban place shouldn't be reconstructed, express their opinion on the new bus routes, vote for the names of the metro station, and offer their own initiatives for consideration by the city leadership, by the city management. But if you probably noticed, there is a picture of panda on my presentation, and I would put it specifically to remind probably the most popular question the active citizens suggested us to vote. That was the question about the future name of the just born panda in the Moscow Zoo, and it was probably the most popular question this year. So people prefer to choose it, to choose the name Katyusha, as far as I remember. But it's actually also a good example to explain that there is a nice website, there's a nice technology, but actually everything looks like a facade, and it doesn't actually can be considered as a real direct democracy instrument. It's just a popular survey, as a questionnaire, and has an informational importance, and it's like a ground to identify the mood for population, its assessments of the actions of the municipal or regional government, and finally about the degree of knowledge of citizens of plans and measures by the local government body. So it also looks like e-democracy, but actually I believe it's not by nature. The other example I would like to discuss with you is public hearings on urban planning issues, and actually it's also was very serious questions during the pandemic, because public hearings on these issues are compulsory if you would like to change the territory plan, if you would like to make an amendment to the charter of the municipality, and etc. And it was a big debate how the public hearings should be organized during the pandemic, when everybody was blocked and could use only Zoom, as we are now here. So the question was basically, can public hearings on urban planning issues be online, or this is like the kind of direct democracy instrument mechanism that can be only physical? Is it possible to have text by emails or books by the telephone? Can be public hearings on can be online. So actually, I would like to come to conclusion. Now we do have public hearings online, but it actually raised a lot of criticisms because public hearings were supposed to be a form of a contact between the authorities and the population when the citizens can have an opportunity to look straight into the eyes to the eyes of the authorities and to ask and raise different kind of questions and express the mood directly. So now we have some changes due to public hearings online. For example, now it's not possible to find out who actually participate in the discussions. This is a classified information. During these meetings, during offline meetings, everyone saw each other, both the speaker and the participants and the deputies, but now no one is going anywhere. The final documents are handled by the city commission, and it's not known who exactly keeps records of votes and prepares documentation. So the conclusions of these hearings have become extremely bureaucratic, and responses have become completely all the same time. There is not even an attempt to take note and explain something to the Moscow residents, at least formally. And it also, I guess, raised a lot of concern. And we in Russia often say that there is nothing more permanent than temporary, and it seems like it's also the case when we talk about public hearings. It was supposed to be as a temporary measure, but now it's what we have as a temporary direct democracy instrument. Finally, the first point, the third point I would like to discuss with you is, of course, the election and the blossom of new technologies in elections. I would say probably we can be some kind of proud because Russia is a pioneer with using technology, but the technologies are pretty much different. We started with using web cameras in all polling stations, and it pretty much it was pretty much expensive, but it also gives an opportunity to everybody to observe the election from their homes, and I think it was a pretty nice initiative. Then we have a new definition of e-voting in the law on elections, and by e-voting, actually, the law meant the special equipment to count the ballots. So on the right part of the slide, you see this kind of special equipment who can count votes on the ballots much more faster, and probably it's a nice way to avoid human errors of the members of electoral commissions. And another innovations that we have now QR code on every paper ballot. So it also makes the process of the counting much more quicker and efficient, and it allows to avoid many errors. And finally, even artificial intelligence is used in the electoral process in Russia. Now you can see the picture of the scanner. There is a big problem with the signings, with them organizing signatures in favor of the candidate or political party list to make sure that the candidate or party list would be registered. So this device, together with the artificial intelligence, helps to check all the signature, and without specialists who usually were experts at this case. But the key and the central issue, I think, of course, is the remote e-voting, and if e-remoting is in conflict with the constitutional electoral principles or not. Actually, we did have lots of experiments. Russian government were trying to find a better way to organize e-voting, distant e-voting, remote e-voting, and it was an era when we all used disk, phones, and etc. But and of course we did know that many foreign countries were trying also to implement different kind of voting, and Estonia probably is the only one state who continues to implement e-voting in their electoral systems. But I think a Russian case is pretty much unique because it's the first time when the remote e-voting system is based on the new technology, on the blockchain, and it all the blockchain is going to be an answer to all the questions all the experts raising now. So e-voting based on the blockchain system is now the official way to participate in elections since 2019. But I must to note that it's an additional way. So we all still have a right to go offline, to use a paper ballot. But if someone would like to try e-voting, they can participate in this way online. So election at any level now can be organized with a remote e-voting, all types of election campaigns. And also in 2020, we also tried e-voting on amendments to the Constitution. So, but it's not quite widespread now. Actually, for example, president elections that took in March this year, there are like 29 regions of Russia that agreed to participate, and you can look at the map of Russia, and you can see that most of the regions are in central Russia. But actually, the remote voting held simultaneously in several subjects of the Russian Federation located in different time zones, and the last president elections in March this year has the result that the turnout was about 94%. So actually, many people now agree more and more to take part, but actually, just another part of people has doesn't have any trust to this kind of technology. So I guess the main issue when we are discussing remote e-voting is that everything is presumed. So we presume that the blockchain technology is an answer to all our troubles, that the blockchain technology allows us to observe the secrecy of voting, that the principle of the immutability or the stored results or the expressions or the will of the voter is also implemented, and there is no any possibility to make any changes to the ballot. The entry of the ballot into the blockchain is guaranteed. It's impossible to substitute or exclude recorded ballots, and it's plausible to decrypt individual ballots and get the results. But actually, this is not only the matter of the trust of people, but it has also some constitutional question. And first of all, the question of universal suffrage, when we still have the digital divide problem, the problem of the secret ballot voting, because we actually have, if we are not an IT specialist, we do not have an opportunity actually to follow, to observe what is really going on and to make our own decision. And of course, it's the concern for equality people, and not only by those who vote, but also by some candidates, because if if you go to the region, if you are a candidate in the region that are used e-voting, it can be resulted in different results as it's in other regions. So actually, another concern is about who is actually organizing of election. And it's interesting that the law now allows every region to use their own regional system, but only Moscow is, we call it a kingdom in the kingdom, has its money budget, and Moscow actually was implemented its own system to organize e-remote voting system, as other regions use the federal one. So, and if we look also at the Moscow system, we may notice that the main organizers are not the members of election commission, that should be independent and etc. It's organized by the executive branch of the Department for Technology at Moscow government. So it's actually we don't. The law doesn't explain the status of the members of this executive department of authorities, and it doesn't explain any status of IT specialists who are obvious needed in such process. And to conclude, I would like to remind that actually there is an attempt to challenge the law that allows remote e-voting to Constitutional Court. And actually it was the member of the Moscow State University, the ex-member of the Moscow State University, who was trying to be elected in the Moscow State Duma, Moscow Parliament. And he has controversial results because he was winning until they added the the results of remote voting, and after that he has lost. He didn't get his mandate, so he tried to challenge the law to the Russian Constitutional Court, but the court refused to consider the complaint against a number of provisions of the law on remote e-voting. And actually, the judges of the court stated that the remote voting gives citizens more opportunities to exercise their voting rights, and they recalled that voting by mail, for example, or internet, as well as by proxy, is a common practice for the electoral legislation of modern states, which is characterized by a tendency to strengthen legal, organizational, and other guarantees to the exercise of electoral rights. So the Constitutional Court also recalled that the law, which was challenged, provides a verification system, and the voting system itself is anonymous, and the powers of the election commissions are clearly defined. So from my perspective, I would rather say this decision of the Constitutional Court can be considered as a missed chance, because the Constitutional Court missed its opportunity to have taken a different path and set out in detail the legal arguments on the remote e-voting. But it is what it is. We also say in Russia that if you cannot stop the party, you should lead it. So I think the remote e-voting is unstoppable now, and it will be widespread in other regions as well. But it also doesn't stop us from discussions and searching for the legal standard of this remote e-voting, because the technology has also a tendency for evolution, and we need to provide some new principles in a digital field to check next technologies in the electoral process as well. Thank you very much for your attention. Много хвала. I would.
Thank you so much, Elena Nikolaevna. Some questions?
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Dear Elena, thank you for your very interesting and very detailed presentation. Just one short question. What do you think for the future, whether these mechanisms will be used like in a broad manner in Moscow, in Russia at all? Is this the future of for the elections in general and direct democracy in Russia? Thank you.
Well, I must confess, I really voted only once digitally, and actually, it was specifically my decision to try it to explain to the students. And actually, I'm not going to vote online anymore in the near future. But this is my choice, and I think, but many people also has their doubts and the lack of trust. But it's also, as you can see, it's up to the people if they would prefer to go offline or online. It seems like we would not be able to avoid remote online voting in near future. It's a part of our political life now, and it would be even on a greater scale, I guess. But I think it's also necessary to continue to talk about that and to encourage our parliament to go into more legal guarantees, because now there is some kind of a legal uncertainty in the law, and it what makes, for example, me worry a lot. And what about the voters, for example, abroad? It's interesting that when the president election took place in March, Russians who actually live abroad didn't have such an opportunity to go online. So let's also makes us wonder, why do we have to continue to use this technology? Because it was more important for those who cannot go to the polling stations, who are abroad, who live in a far east, in taiga, indigenous people, etc., etc. But most of the people, actually, if you would check the statistics, live in Moscow, and most of the people, it's, well, we'll say it's not officially, but they say that most of the people are from the state organization, etc., and the government encourage people to use and to show around everybody and around the world that it's very popular. So let's see.
Thank you very much for your answer.
Dear Elena, now next speaker. The floor is given to Vasily Zagordin, postgraduate of law department, our faculty. Vasily?
Dear colleagues, can you hear me?
Yes, everything is perfect.
Can you hear me?
Yes, everything is okay.
Okay, cool. So I will proceed to my presentation. On the first slide, you can see the plan of the talk I'm gonna give. So I'm gonna talk about why I choose Europe for my presentation. And then I'm gonna describe a little bit the condition of European politics, and then proceed to European legal reality and how legal constructions within the European Union correspond to the political condition, what they are, the contradiction and implications here. And finally, I'm going to talk about where this situation places us and how it's gonna and how it might be evolving in the nearest future, and what are the problems and the threats here. So why I picked the European Union to talk about modern constitutionalism and how the classic concepts are fitting the new reality. And I did it for the following reasons. Europe was always important for us in terms of constitutional constructs, and basically all the political and legal concepts we use here in Russia. Totality of them, I would say, we took from there. And so the legal development and legal tradition of in Europe serves as an example for us. Secondly, what is more important, we share mutual history, and for instance, Second World War remains to be a very important historical event, which still shapes our ideological, legal, and political sphere. And what is more important, we share history of ideas, and these ideological concepts we use and employ in our everyday political lives, also our common heritage. And last but not least, I might say that the topic of European Union is really important for Balkans and for Serbia. And whether you read the news, something about what's going on in Serbia, be it a recent visit of Chinese leader, or any new issue or conflict with Kosovo, everywhere the EU envoys are involved, and every single issue in its politics has its echo within or on European level in Brussels. So moving to the modern condition of Europe, first of all, stress that Europe finds itself in the face of European Parliament elections, which are going to take place less than a month. And like many other global counterparts, European voters are deeply divided in how to deal with major challenges. And this political polarization is highly persistent these days, alongside with the rise of the far-right parties. And I collected several citations from modern philosophers and political and legal thinkers who try to describe this situation, and you can read them on the slide. And the first one, two colleagues from University of Bocconi and European University Institute are talking about the hectic period of change, and they warn about the fundamental debate that's going to take place within the European elections. And the following citations from European philosophers. The first one, Slavini and Zizek, who actually cites Berardi, and they warn and mention the worsening condition of life, and talking about general mood in people's mind, who actually maybe lack a clear vision of political future. And the final philosopher I put here on my slide is Agamben, who actually himself also cites another one. And these two philosophers argue that we are finding ourselves in the situation of new 30s, which are coming. And this happening because the new world order is now lacking, and we don't know, generally speaking, no one knows how to build another world order. And the same situation they warn happened during 30s, back a century, basically a century ago, and they try to remind where these unpleasant circumstances led us in the past. And finally, I draw attention to the recent Macron speech, where he was talking about mortality of Europe, and actually he brought attention to three major topics like European values, the rise of nationalism, and the economy rivals. And in the following, I'm gonna put stress on these three major issues from the point of legal theory and legal practice within the European Union. First of all, moving to the idea of values, I would like to stress that the reality within the EU, the constituent power is lacking. So basically, we cannot talk about the basis for a single European identity, nor for any legal common basis of this intergovernmental, basically, organization. And from this idea stems the argument that that it's no possibility to actually talk about direct democracy or evolving democracy in the situation where there is no constituent power and it's not gonna be built in the nearest future, according to at least the basing on the political observation. Secondly, another scholar, slightly contradictory to the previous remark, but still talks about the nationalism on European level. So basically, he starts with the assumption, widespread assumption, that European Union supporters often call the EU as antidote to nationalism, but yet today he's saying that the European Union itself is hardening its borders against the outside world and basically building nationalism on the regional level. So from one point of view, it could be a remedy to the problem of the democratic deficit, whereas the EU widespread nationalism, whereas whether it would be created, for instance, will pave the way maybe to the increasing democracy participation, but simultaneously it might be a threat for the nation states, as we already discussed today, and also bears some kind of danger to the very ideas of European democracy with its cultural homogeneity and prosperity for different cultures. The next problem I would like to draw your attention to is ideological turbulence within the EU. So basically, again, we can say that the western part of the EU is built, and the EU itself is built on one kind of narrative and understanding of historical events, whereas the newly adopted new member states basically draw their inspiration from the completely different and war period. And the conflict between them is widely seen in different legal decisions. And for instance, that major decision of European Court on rule of law as well. And without proper attention to these differences from the policymakers and from the legal actors, I doubt that any prosperity or any working solution to the current crisis of intergovernmentalism within the European Union could be found. And here I also wanted to mention the attempt European Union made with by the European Court, who tried to use the rule of law decision as an attempt to build a new ideological platform for the whole entity. But actually, in my point of view, European Court made the conflict between Western and Eastern member states more evident and more persistent. Instead of creating some kind of bridge between two or different legal orders, but still European in nature, the court actually came up with another conflict and basically brought this conflict to the legal dimension. And here is no wonder, I would say, that populism nowadays, as a rule of law concept, finally enough, is being treated like a new ideology in this case. And for instance, even the new think tank established by Hungary in Brussels, MCC Brussels, which employed to explain and justify Orban's system of government, basically claims the idea that paradoxically populism serves now as a source of democratic legitimation for the member states, whereas populism itself doesn't rely on the democratic participation, doesn't grant this participation. But and nevertheless, the very problem that populism arises should draw our attention to the problem of democratic deficit within the EU itself. And to conclude, I would like to draw attention to another very important fact that now basically we find ourselves in a pretty vulnerable and dangerous situation. Yes, I agree with the previous speaker that that the European Union was designed maybe with no real intention of democracy in its nature. But however, it was made for a reason, and maybe it was made to avoid or to technically block the threat of returning fascism in everyday political life. But nowadays, in the situation where this mechanism doesn't really serve its purpose, and alongside with social economic developments within the states, we definitely should think about the danger of any negative consequences evolving from these circumstances. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Vasily, for your deep theoretic presentation. And I hope some questions, some challenges to Vasily, maybe.
No, we do not have questions, but it doesn't mean that his presentation was not an interesting and inspiring one. Sometimes questions are not needed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Then I give you the chance. Just a second. Students from Moscow University, Law Department.
Well, thank you very much. And first of all, I want to thank organizers of this event. And let me just start my presentation. I want to be brief today. I have just 5 points, and I hope they are even connected points. But the main argument of my presentation is that for contemporary constitutionalism, it is the right time and place to turn from personal data regulation to regulation of computing resources and labor in order to promote human rights online. And to prove this point, I'm going to talk a lot about political economy of digital platforms and artificial intelligence. So let me start with this point. So digital platforms have a natural tendency toward monopolization. Well, we all know what are digital platforms, what digital platforms are. I counted more devices here in this room than people, which is quite an interesting thing. So digital platforms like Apple, Google, Amazon, and others, social media, they give us digital infrastructure that enable different groups of people to interact. And given this point of view on digital platforms, we can find their distinctive features that lead towards monopolization. First of all, digital platforms rely on network effects. So it's an idea that more people use a platform, the more value it has. Digital platforms have an ability to rapidly scale just because they don't need to invest in building, for example, big facilities. They use cross subsidies to evolve. And these three features, because of these three features, digital platforms have this tendency toward monopolization. Now, I should say, I need to say that today, in AI industry, large digital platforms, again, like Microsoft, Google, Meta, and others, they have a leading role in developing AI system. So industry structure includes, of course, AI consumers, so all of us, AI startups, which are companies that are making new services, and they are very specialized companies focused on specific problems. They are usually small and unknown, and big companies, AI providers. They own a means of production for AI, which includes hardware, software, and data. And which is more important, these companies, they have ability to invest in computing, and they have capacity to retain talents, to retain highly skilled workers. The second point about AI production, which is also important in order to prove the main argument, is that model production and model deployment are becoming a real battleground for who will control AI in the future. So AI production chain includes four main stages. First of all, you need to, in order to make an AI system, we need to find data, then we need to process it, so to clean and label, and then model production and model deployment starts. Which means that this last two stages, they require highly skilled workers and computing power, which, turning back to the previous slide, has big digital platform firms. And saying that I need I need to stress that nowadays regulation of personal data is not that important, and contemporary constitutionalism to limit the powers of big platform firms, big private actors should turn to antitrust regulation as to limit the concentration of computing power within the structures, and to labor regulation. So to limit the ability of such big companies to concentrate and retain highly skilled workers. And actually, in the December 2023, there was a big, let's say, conflict within OpenAI when OpenAI is one of the companies that are quite famous today for developing chatbots. So in this board of directors of this company decided to remove Chief Executive Officer Seth Altman from his position because the board of directors thought that he to simply put it, doesn't make things good in order to secure the main goal of the company, which is to make safe and reliable general artificial intelligence. And this company, OpenAI, has very close ties with Microsoft, one of the leading digital platform firms, because OpenAI provides Microsoft with these AI models, which is now included into basic Microsoft products like, I don't know, for example, Office or even PowerPoint, which I'm now using. And so Microsoft wanted to have Sam Altman back on his position. And in order to do that, Microsoft had developed 3 options. The first option was to work with a new CEO of the company and convince the board of directors to reconsider its decision. The second option was to use the previously promised to the company subsidy as leverage. And the third one was to create jobs inside inside the big firm Microsoft, and try to actually in fact destroy the startup OpenAI. And actually Microsoft used all the 3 options to reinstate Sam Altman. So they were even ready to they even invited all of the employees of OpenAI, and so the big company won. And this case shows us that today regulation of computing powers of digital platforms and its labor policies is more important than regulation of personal data issues. Thank you for your attention and for such a great company.
Thank you for presentation. And now I give the floor.
I have a question, yes.
Question, yes?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we hear you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. It's really interesting, but this is really a new topic to me. And I really tried hard to understand all these new terms for me. But I have a question because the title of your presentation is Digital Platforms and Artificial Intelligence Ways to Promote Human Rights. My question is, are there any tools which artificial intelligence can give us, which can help us not only in promote, but for example, in interpretation of the norms regarding human rights? Is there any tools that can help us to protect human rights? For example, we are dealing with the problem of abusing of human rights in a digital space. But can that digital space, through artificial intelligence, help us to protect human rights? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for your question. I just want to clarify for myself. Do you mean tools that are based on artificial intelligence? Yeah?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Well, to be honest, I must say that probably I don't know the tools that are nowadays that are used on artificial intelligence and are really effective for this purpose. I must say that almost every month we see some problems with different chatbots that produces these biases. The last example is with Gemini, but probably we have some examples from court system because nowadays artificial intelligence is widely used by different parties of disputes in courts. And they use, for example, ChatGPT to and ask it about some legal issues. So, but as different authorities say, these chatbots are not still, are not quite precise in the answers, and people still need lawyers, and it's a good thing, to hear for us today. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any questions? Somebody wants?
No, thank you.
I now give the floor to Alexander, to Vladislav Knyazhev, Magister of Law Faculty. We hear you.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you very much for invitation. I'm really glad to be there. So the topic of my report is connected with a direct effect of the Constitution. Constitution has the primacy of legal regulation. This is an obvious feature. Countries that have experienced a period of nominal constitutional regulation, but have embarked on the path of real constitutionalism, often expressly prescribe provisions of its direct effect in the text of a basic law. For example, the constitutions of Lithuania, Ukraine, Bulgaria, and Poland have points that the norms of the constitution have direct effect. The constitutions of Germany, Serbia, and Russia have norms that human rights are something that acts directly. In a narrow sense, the direct effect of a constitution is the possibility of applying constitutional norms in specific relations. So the subjects of direct action of the Constitution are public authorities, primarily president, parliament, the government, and also courts. I suppose that the most significant problems arise concerning the direct application of the Constitution in courts. One, the courts deal with the constitutional provisions on rights. It's precisely here that constitutional regulation encounters the limitation of majority power. Theoretically, it's obvious that in a state governed by the rule of law, the courts should rely on the principles of the Constitution when resolving specific disputes. But what does the legal system in continental states actually require from courts? Whether a court can refer to provisions of the Constitution depend on the model of constitutional control in the state. In the European model, the function belongs to specialized bodies, not ordinary courts. Here, the activity of the Constitutional Court is conditio sine qua non of the reality of the Constitution. There is a lot of literature that prescribes the role of Constitutional Court in this, in the reality of the Constitution. The significant role of Constitutional Court is especially noted. At the same time, according to the straight word of the father of the church, Saint Isaac the Syrian, demons fear equitability. This also means that it's harmful for a constitutional order when legal institutions develop inevenly to varying degrees. In other words, a legal order with a strong constitutional court may be ineffective if ordinary courts resolve disputes solely based on statutes without taking into account the principles of a constitution. Here is an example. 2 months ago, the Constitutional Court of Russia ruled a straightforward case. It concerned the correct interpretation of the norms of the Criminal Procedure Act regarding jurisdiction. A citizen who appealed to the Constitutional Court has been seeking access to justice for 3 years. Ordinary courts prefer to interpret the statute literally, but the literal meaning of norms blocked any access to any court. As a result, a constitutional court recognized, of course, the act as consistent with the Constitution. Essentially, it simply interpreted statute norms within the paradigm of the Constitution. How effective has the Russian legal system demonstrated itself in this case? This is a question. I disagree with the opinion that in continental states, ordinary courts are limited in their ability to directly apply a constitution. In fact, there are 3 ways: rarely resolving disputes based on constitution, sometimes referring to the body of constitutional review to examine a disputed point, and always a constitutionally conformal interpretation of an applied legal norm. Resolving disputes based on a constitution happens rarely because in constitutional states, so-called screen law principles is prevalent. Its idea is that ordinary courts cannot assess the constitutionality of bylaws because there is a statute between the Constitution and bylaw. The Supreme Court of Russia understands this doctrine more broadly. In the official explanation, the Supreme Court writes, in cases where an article of the Constitution is referential, the courts must apply the statute when considering cases. And that's it. It's strange for me that in the explanation dedicated to the application of a constitution by courts, the Supreme Court does not instruct the courts not only to apply a statute, but to apply a statute in a constitutionally conformal interpretation. This detail is very important. Note how the judicial system itself does not guide the courts to directly apply the Constitution. So, for this reason, a more precise understanding of the direct effect of the Constitution is a handbook. Is that a Constitution is a handbook for a law enforcer, and in applying any normative act, they constantly compare the points of an act with the norms of the Constitution. Therefore, it's important to ordinary courts to have, firstly, the possibility to refer disputed provisions to the body of a constitutional review, and second, the ability for ordinary courts to provide a constitutionally conforming interpretation in an appealed norm. The ability for ordinary courts to refer cases to constitutional courts exists in every European country with a specialized constitutional jurisdiction. In Germany, Poland, Belgium, and the Czech Republic, any ordinary court can initiate the process, while in France and Belgium, only courts of a certain level can do so. This is a judicial dialogue, thanks to which ordinary courts and the constitutional court in a particular country, combining their powers within the framework of the separation of powers, realize the deterrent potential much more effectively. Together, they can act as a stop sign against authoritarian initiatives. Since ordinary courts are closer to everyday issues, they have more opportunities to quickly identify threats to the rule of law. I'd like to note that in continental states, ordinary courts must justify why they believe legislation fails the scrutiny. For example, the Constitutional Court of Germany clarifies that an ordinary court may request a decision on the constitutionality of a norm if it has fully examined legal status of a norm. That is, the numerous opinions in courts, in court practice and literature regarding possible interpretations. The Supreme Court of the Czech Republic indicates that ordinary courts must be convinced that no possible interpretation of a statute will comply with the Constitution. On the other hand, the Russian Supreme Court instructs courts to refer to the Constitutional Court in cases of any uncertainty. Paradoxically, the Constitutional Court of Russia itself insists that ordinary courts should not be active in the application of the Constitution. At the same time, the mutual activity of the constitutional and ordinary courts is a necessary condition of a productive dialogue. Given a constitutionally conformal interpretation of an applied legal norm means that a court seeks to interpret a statute in accordance with the Constitution. This method complements the generally accepted idea that the interpretation and appreciation of ordinary legislation are the prerogative of ordinary courts. Unfortunately, Russian literature does not pay attention to this method of applying a constitution by the courts. In practice, this method is widely used in European courts. There is vivid evidence of this in Italy and Poland, where constitutional courts use the doctrine of leading law. This means that they, in principle, make decisions on the constitutionality of the normative act in the form in which they are understood and applied in real time in the judicial practice of ordinary courts. It's notable that in European literature, there is a discussion about the problem that ordinary courts may be too active in interpreting the law. On the contrary, an analysis of individual appeals to the Constitutional Court of Russia has led me to think that citizens often appeal not the unconstitutionality of a norm, but it's incorrect, I mean literal, not in line with the spirit of the Constitution, interpretation and application by ordinary courts. So, the summary. First, in continental states, the direct application of a constitution depends on the intention of higher courts to have a dialogue with the ordinary courts. As long as ordinary courts are mechanical rather than creative decision makers, any dialogue is impossible. The negative value of it lies in the ineffectiveness of judicial power within the system of checks and balances. Second, judicial dialogue has two aspects. First, ordinary court refer to the constitutional court when they are convinced of the unconstitutionality of a statute. And second, the constitutional court limits itself from providing detailed interpretation of laws when it's unnecessary to maintain the division of labor between constitutional and ordinary courts. And third, so-called screen law principle, at first glance, may seem to hinder the application of a constitution. The constitutionally conformal interpretation of laws means that there is no case when an ordinary court can reject a constitution. Applying the law, the court find it in the meaning that correspond to the constitutional principles in every cases. So that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, Vlad. And some questions to Vlad. We wait from Serbian side.
Yes, dear Vladislav, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Just a brief question. What do you think whether the constitutional courts are in a better position than so-called ordinary courts in implementation of constitutional norms, in interpretation and practice of allowing the constitution in every day?
Thank you for your question. I suppose that when there is a conflict about interpretation of constitutional norm and the case is in constitutional court, of course, there is constitutional court who is entitled to give an official interpretation of this norm. But if there is no necessity of interpretation of any norm by constitutional court, I suppose that ordinary courts must use constitution and with the help of it interpret the norms of ordinary statutes when resolving disputes.
Thank you very much.
For your question. But now, Serbian side, begin your presentation, and George Markovich, we wait for you. I hope that your presentation will be very interesting for us.
Professor Markovich, you have a floor. So. I'm sorry, Professor Markovich, we can't hear you.
Окей. Здравствуйте, всем привет. Мeni огромно удовольствие, что мы сегодня вместе и надеюсь, что в будущем мы будем встречаться здесь, в Белграде или Москве, России. Now I will continue in English. Hello, everybody. My today's topic is the influence of the Council of Europe and the Venice Commission on electoral law and elections in Serbia. Just a brief history of Council of Europe. As you know, Council of Europe is a regional European organization, and there are three main goals of its practice: protection of human rights, evaluating and promoting democracy, and promoting the rule of law in Europe. Council of Europe it was founded in 1949, and Serbia, as part of State Union of Serbia and Montenegro, joined this organization in 2003. Today, Council of Europe consists of 46 member states. Venice Commission, or European Commission for Democracy through Law, is the advisory body on constitutional matters of Council of Europe, and it consists of 61 member states, 46 from Council of Europe member states, 15 non-European members from non-European members, and 4 observer countries. As Council of Europe, Venice Commission also has 3 main areas of its work: monitoring democratic institutions and fundamental rights, constitutional justice and ordinary justice, and what is my today topic, monitoring elections, referendums, and political parties. Venice Commission has close cooperation with the European Union and OSCE organization and its Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights. Members of Venice Commissions are independent experts, and they shall not receive or accept any instructions for any side. Every member state appoint 1 member and 1 substitute member to Venice Commission, and the term of office of its members is 4 years, and there is possibility of reappointment of members to Venice Commission, and they can resign or can be dismissed by Venice Commission. After this short introduction to these 2 organizations, I want to emphasize, to stress the kind or the nature of influence which Venice Commission has to Serbia and any other member state, especially candidates to European Union. Venice Commission adopts opinions and reports on certain topic, and the Council of Europe use these opinions and reports in its own reports and in the work of its various bodies. And in the final stage, European Union, especially its Directorate General for Neighborhood and Enlargement Negotiations and Politics, use these opinions and reports in its annual report concerning the success in negotiations in Serbian or in other cases for the countries which are the candidates to European Union. And that is the way how Venice Commission influence in everyday politics and legislation of its members, from indirect influence as advisory body to almost direct influence and direct political consequences in process of negotiations and enlargement process to EU. As I said, the opinions of Venice Commission, Council of Europe, and OSCE are usually a part of annual reports members, candidate states on its path to EU. And in last annual report on Serbia, EU stated, emphasized that Serbia still needs to address a number of long-term Council of Europe and OSCE recommendations. Now, I want to emphasize three essential elements for the successful changes to electoral legislation which Venice Commission adopted in one of its opinions. In the first place, legislation should be adopted by broad consensus in a certain state. It should be clear and comprehensive and harmonized with the international obligations and prior recommendations of this body and other relevant bodies. And very important, the political commitment to implementation of these standards should exist in every certain state. When it comes to Serbia, we can question whether is clear and comprehensive legislation. As you can see, there are several laws in this matter. Firstly, law on the election of members of parliament. This is the main electoral law in Serbian legislation, and there is an analogous application of this law in any other cases, relevant cases. Beside this law, there is also law on local elections and law on the election of the President of the Republic. Also, there are election-related laws, law on political parties, law on unique voter lists, law on financing and political activities, law on prevention of corruption, and law on electronic media. All of these laws, almost 10 of them, consist Serbian electoral legislation. As you can see, Serbian electoral law is not harmonized, and this is one of the oldest Venice Commission recommendations, that Serbia should consider consolidation and harmonization of the three laws into one. These three laws of election of members of parliament, local elections, and election of the president of the republic, which should have a common general rules and exceptions where required by the specificities of each type of election. From the perspective of Venice Commission, this should strengthen the coherence of the legal framework as a whole. Further, besides these three essential elements which I mentioned, Venice Commission also emphasized that there are three or several framework conditions for successful organization and implementation of election legislation. Firstly, respect for fundamental rights, regulatory levels and stability of electoral law, and the several procedural guarantees. The organization of elections by an independent and impartial body, observation of elections, and an effective system of appeal. I will show you the second one, the stability of Serbian electoral law and electoral legislation. As you can see on this time scale, in the 20, almost more than 20 years ago, we adopted the electoral law. When I say electoral law, I'm thinking about the law on the election of members of parliament as the main law. And just after 3 months, we had elections at the end of 2000 year. 20 years later, there occurred the first big and substantial change of this law. Threshold has been reduced from 5 to 3%. And as you can see as well, elections also were held just several months after this change. 2 years later, new electoral law adopted, but it was formally new, but from the substantial perspective, the main principles from the old law remained, but there were some big changes concerning electoral administration. And again, elections held just a few months, even 2 months after these changes. Finally, in this current year, we changed the law on a unique voter list, and this change was also very close to elections which are scheduled for the 2nd of June of this year. What Venice Commission is saying about this time framework? The general Venice Commission recommendation is that amendments to core elements of the electoral legal framework should be avoided in the year preceding the elections. This is the general recommendation. But there is exception. Amendments made close before elections are acceptable when intended to ensure conformity with the standards of the European electoral heritage. And Venice Commission rated the 2022 reform process, and it stated that process was inclusive and led to broad agreement on a significant revision of the legal framework. and the participation of the opposition was enabled. As you can see, we can say that Serbia violated this general Venice Commission recommendation, but we can say that we are according our changes were according to in harmony with this exception. That is the little trick, and that is the conclusion about this time frame. Also, I want to stress a few issues about media status in Serbia. The broadest Venice commenter on this area is that there is no specific legislation on electoral campaign on social media or the internet at all. This broad area is not covered at all with our legislation. Also, Venice Commission stressed that there exists the lack of equal opportunities for electoral competitors with regard to their possibilities of access to media, and that is a matter of great concern in the Republic of Serbia. This is in contrary with the recommendation, Venice Commission recommendation, which stated that equality of opportunities regarding access to the media during electoral campaigns has been recognized as one of the most important principles in guaranteeing free and fair elections. Obviously, in this area, we should improve our legislation framework. Finally, there is several general remarks on the Serbian electoral system made by Venice Commission. Venice Commission said that proportional system in combination in single national-wide constituency and in combination with closed lists is producing broken link between voters and their MPs. In the other words, MPs are highly dependent on the internal democracy in the political parties. That is current state. What is the Venice Commission recommendations in this sphere? Venice Commission said that Serbia should increase internal political party democracy, internal democracy in political parties, and obviously this is easier path because we don't have to change our constitution or our laws, but it's not very easy from the perspective of political system and party functioning. In formal terms, more difficult ways to increase number of constituencies, but because obviously we have to change some of our laws, or to open a list to voters. This also required a change in our legislation. Finally, some conclusions. Council of Europe and Venice Commission have significant impact, as you can saw in previous slides, on Serbian election law and consequently on our elections as well. I would say that this influence is mostly positive, and the biggest problem remains that we should put emphasis on implementation of Venice Commission recommendation, because the most of our legal provisions are in harmony of Venice Commission recommendations. The most of them, not at all, but sometimes or many times the implementation of our legal framework is not on the level it should be. Thank you for your attention, and I am ready for your questions.
Thank you for your presentation, Dr. Markovic, and I hope that some questions from our side and for your friends can be interesting for you. Some questions.
I have a question. Thank you for thank you for your report. Clarify, please. Are nowadays changes of the electoral law technical or they is connected with some constitutional principles?
Can you please repeat the question, because there were some technical problems. I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, of course. Now, clarify, please. Nowadays, change in Serbian electoral law are technical or essential. They is connected with constitutional principles in Serbia.
Okay. Yes. As I said, 2 years before 2 years, we changed our main electoral laws, and from the perspective of electoral administration, these changes were significant. But from the other perspective, from the perspective of our electoral system in general, it's the same as previous laws, previous law of on the election of the members of parliament. The main principles of our electoral system were unchanged. One, that Serbia is one electoral constituency, that is a proportional system, and that the lists are still closed to voters. And that's like the short answer is yes and no. Yes, in this area of electoral administration, but no in this like main principles of our electoral system.
Thanks a lot for the presentation, as I'm also interested in electoral law. So I would like to ask a question about the recommendation of the commissions to have specific legislation on campaign on social media. You mentioned it should be a specific legislation, but in Russia, for example, we do not have any specific legislation on that issue. We have just general rules on campaign. It doesn't matter if it should applied on offline media, online media, social media. It's just the rules. Can you give us any examples on this specific legislation, what it should be?
Okay. In Serbia is similar as in Russia. We just have the general rules of media covering of electoral campaign. There is no specific rules for a campaign on Instagram or in Facebook or in electronic media on internet, which are on internet or YouTube or some podcasts or vlogs, etc. And that was stated also in Venice Commission opinion, that we should be very careful in regulating this particular area, because it should be regulated, but not over-regulated, because if it's overregulated, we can easily violate some of the essential human rights, like human right to free speech, for example. That is like, I hope that I answered your question. Thanks.
Thank you so much, George Markot. And we wait the next presentation. I now give the floor to Alex Markovich, Department of Public Law of Belgrade University. We hear you with pleasure.
Всем добрый день. На самом начале хотел бы обратить всем на русском языке. Меня зовут Алекса Николич, и я ассистент юридического факультета Белградского университета. Мне большое удовольствие иметь возможность выступать на той престижной конференции. Мне очень приятно, что связали два факультета, Белградский и Московский. Особенно хотел бы поздравить коллегу Вадима Королкова и еще раз поздравить его с успешной защитой докторской диссертации. Конечно, большой привет также идет коллеге Егору Крамаренко, который отлично говорит и знает сербский язык и сербское конституционное право. Согласно условиям конференции, мое выступление федерализм как ключевой фактор конституционной идентичности Боснии и Герцеговине будет на английском языке. So, the federalism is a key factor of constitutional identity of Bosnia and Herzegovina. In this brief presentation, I will explore the issue of the non-existence of the constitutional identity of Bosnia and Herzegovina. After a brief theoretical analysis of the concept of constitutional identity, I identify criteria for defining it in Bosnia and Herzegovina. In essence, the constitutional identity of this country is composed of two entities, Republika Srpska and the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, as well as three constituent peoples and others. In other words, the constitutional identity of Bosnia comprises territorial federalism, the entities, and non-territorial federalism, the constituent peoples and others. Subsequently, I examine whether the concept of constitutional identity is applied in Bosnia and Herzegovina through the prism of analysis, the composition of the Constitutional Court of Bosnia. So, once again, this lecture consists of two parts. In the first part, I will briefly address the theoretical analysis of the concept of constitutional identity, and my colleague Alexander Cvetkovic will also elaborate more on this later. While in the second part, I will analyze the existence of the concept of constitutional identity in Bosnia and Herzegovina with a special focus on the role and composition of the Constitutional Court of Bosnia. So, what is the constitutional identity? Laterly, during his presentation on the topic national constitutional identity in front of the European Union at an international scientific conference held here in Belgrade on May 2022, Professor of Constitutional Law from Sorbonne, Bertrand Mathieu, initiated a debate on constitutional identity and its understanding in Europe. After asserting that the main component of Greece's constitutional identity is the Orthodox Church, Mathieu received a question from the audience. What is the main component of Serbia's constitutional identity? He responded, probably Kosovo, or maybe the European Union. After all, assess it yourselves. That's why there are referendums. It seems that the question of constitutional identity is far more complex and multifaceted than Bertrand Mathieu's initial response might suggest. It cannot be simplified to such an extent as various factors and indicators must be taken into account, not only legal, but also political, sociological, historical, cultural, and so on. Only such an approach, even though it is often criticized in academia as subjective and unbalanced, is capable of revealing what lies behind the constitution or which forces influence its creator. So once again, what is constitutional identity? The most prominent scholars attempt to decipher what is the best, most accurate, and most rigorous definition of constitutional identity. Naturally, each of them has arrived at a different conclusion as their approaches and methodologies have varied. For Michael Rosenfield, the concept of constitutional identity ranged from focusing on the actual characteristics and provisions of the Constitution, the separation of power, the form of government, etc. Gary Jeffrey Jacobson, my mistake, thinks along similar lines through his own definition of constitutional identity includes another crucial element, the history. The Constitution acquires identity through experience, he says, and it represents the past of the state as well as the determination of society to overcome that past. At last, authors like Pietro Faraguna consider that constitutional identity serves as a cognitive tool to recognize the identity of the Constitution despite all transformations, modifications, and amendments that occurred in a given constitutional experience. In this sense, for example, a constitution may remain the same as the one originally adopted despite several amendments and interpretative transformations. Itself may not change despite all textual and interpretative differences brought by decades or centuries of constitutional experience. Professors of constitutional law from the Belgrade University School of Law have attempted to define this theoretical question that has puzzled renewed figures in constitutional law and political science for decades. Scholars like Tanasije Marinkovic note that constitutional identity consists of basic constitutional values and can be uncovered through the analysis of old historical constitutions, as certain legal norms remain in force even if they were not explicitly written in the Constitution. Vladan Petrov discovers constitutional identity in the constitutional text, defining it as a collection of general and specific constitutional principles, as well as constitutional values. So, if we consider constitutional identity as a set of fundamental constitutional values contained in the constitution of a country or state, the question arises: what constitutes the constitutional identity of Bosnia and Herzegovina if that country has their own constitutional identity? I think that in a very simplified manner, it seems to be the binding fabric from which Bosnia and Herzegovina is woven, the existence of these two entities, Republika Srpska and the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and also the three constituent peoples, Serbs, Croats, and Bosniaks. The existence of entities with full original powers, as well as guaranteeing the rights of constituent peoples, is the only guarantee for the survival of post-Dayton Bosnia and Herzegovina. Therefore, the constitutional identity of this country consists of Republika Srpska and the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which are also signatories of the Dayton Peace Agreement, as well as Serbs, Croats, and Bosniaks as constituent peoples in Bosnia and Herzegovina, along with the others, according to the earlier judgments of the European Court of Human Rights. In other words, the constitutional identity of Bosnia and Herzegovina consists of elements of territorial and non-territorial federalism. So, if we perceive constitutional identity as a set of fundamental constitutional values contained in the constitution of a country, the question arises: why isn't the Constitutional Court of Bosnia and Herzegovina composed of those who best represent the constitutional identity of Bosnia? Why doesn't Constitutional Court of Bosnia and Herzegovina embody the constitutional identity of the country, representatives of Republika Srpska and the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina from the ranks of all three constituent peoples as well as others, but includes international judges? The answer to this question only partially lies in the constitutional text itself. The Constitution of Bosnia and Herzegovina in Article 4, Paragraph 1 stipulates that the Constitutional Court of Bosnia and Herzegovina consists of 9 members, 4 appointed by the Federation of Bosnia and 2 by Republika Srpska. The remaining 3 members are appointed by the President of the European Court of Human Rights following consultation with the Presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina. From this point of view, I can say that there is no consultation whatsoever when we talk about the Presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina and when we talk about the European Court of Human Rights. However, the decision-making method has been causing a crisis in Bosnia from the beginning, after leading to overvoting the Serbs and Croats, as well as unconstitutional and anti-Dayton actions. This has culminated in the last 2 years with the adoption of the law on non-implementation of decisions of the Constitutional Court of Bosnia in Republika Srpska, as well as the departure of Serbian judges from the Constitutional Court of Bosnia. The Constitutional Court of Bosnia is currently lacking 1 judge from the Croatian ethnic groups and 2 judges from the Serbian ethnic group, and by 2026, all domestic judges are expected to retire, leaving only foreign judges in its composition. What is the legitimacy of an institution where only judges from Germany, Switzerland, and Albania are present instead of domestic judges? Is there any country in the world where the guardian of the Constitution is a foreigner? That absurdity should be addressed by changing the method of selection and composition of judges in the Bosnia and Herzegovina Constitutional Court. This has been repeatedly emphasized as an obligation of Bosnia and Herzegovina toward the EU path, especially now that Bosnia and Herzegovina has been given the green light to start negotiations with the European Union. Mischievous politicians in Bosnia argue that such activity would constitute an unconstitutional move, demonstrating a fundamental lack of understanding of their own country's constitution. The Constitution of Bosnia in Article 4, paragraph 4, allows the Parliamentary Assembly of Bosnia 5 years after the first appointment of foreign judges to legislate a different method of selecting these 3 judges. Therefore, the Constitution of Bosnia itself provides the possibility of protecting the constitutional identity of Bosnia and Herzegovina by placing within legal framework the possibility of changing the method of selection and composition of the Constitutional Court of Bosnia. So, what can we conclude? It seems that in Bosnia, there are attempts to change the constitutional architecture of that country. Its foundations are being altered, which could lead to the collapse of the structure itself. However, for it to survive, it is necessary to return the straightens its foundations, and that means respecting the Dayton Constitution of Bosnia. In this way, the constitutional identity of Bosnia consisting of Republika Srpska and the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, along with all their Daytonian competencies, including, of course, the Serbs, Croats, Bosniaks, and others, is preserved. Only such Bosnia and Herzegovina fulfills the fundamental values of the European Union outlined in Article 2 of the Treaty of the European Union, and only such Bosnia and Herzegovina, I think, has a future. Spasibo большое. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your beautiful Russian at first, and then
Спасибо большое.
and then I hope that we have some ask for you for some questions for you. Maybe some.
Могу я? Да. Я подготовился. Я Алекса. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. How are you, my friend?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you for kind words and support. I'm glad to see how our friendship carried our to the friendship between our faculties. Here is future proof of the power of federalism. Now, with your permission, I'll ask my question.
Yes, you have my permission.
Okay. The concept of constitutional identity is the subject of very heated debate in Russia as well. Personally, it seems to me that if we do not try to hide from solving problems behind constitutional identity, it has only important advantage. Constitutional identity seems to connect the past, the present, but for real development, it should be direct towards the future development.
In this sense, federalism can indeed reflect constitutional identity in the United States, in Switzerland, in India, and even in Russia. But how can we recognize federalism as part of constitutional identity in Bosnia and Herzegovina, where it only the conflict without solving it? That is a constitutional identity in the past and the present without a future.
Не mogę da se učutka skroz.
I think that we
5 minut sad samo da se malo ohlade i osuše. Napolju.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Just a moment. Alexa, we can hear you. Yeah. Dear Alexa, I'm sorry. We can't hear you.
Вадим, я там хочу еще дополнить.
Да, сейчас.
Aleksa, mutovan, čuješ se.
Ой, что я на русском пишу?
Это не совсем русский. Можно и на русском? Это можно. Да, я что понимаю. Ты посмотри, все речи правильно проходят. Что ж такое-то?
Alexa, we can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Can you hear me right now? So I think that the lack of understanding between two entities is the main problem of federalism in Bosnia and Herzegovina, for short. And okay, can you hear me right now? Okay,
Yeah.
Great. First time charm. Okay, the main key for the Bosnia and Herzegovina is the cooperation between two entities, the Federation and the Republika Srpska, and the understanding the problems of Republika Srpska at one side or Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina at the other side. I don't think that we can now find the gap between these two entities, but I think that we must try to find it in the future, because if we don't find any possibility for cooperation, I don't think that Bosnia can exist in this form.
That's the point.
Yeah.
Thanks. Very interesting presentation. Now we wait the presentation of Alexander Tsvetkovich. We give you floor. Now your step. Alexander Tsvetkovich.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Excellent.
Great. Thank you very much. Well, thank you for the opportunity to present this as a topic in this conference. It is really my pleasure to be here today and to have this nice opportunity. First of all, I must explain the title of my presentation. The title is The Relationship Between National Constitutional Identity and Sovereignty, the Case of Serbia. Several questions actually arise from this title. First, what is the constitutional identity? Alex tried to explain the notion of constitutional identity. Second question, maybe what is a national identity? The third question, maybe what is authority? But also, additionally, the term national is in brackets. So one of the questions is the relationship between national and constitutional identity. So the question is whether there is something that we can call national constitutional identity, or these are two separate things? Two groups of reasons led me to choose this as the topic of my presentation. The first group consists of practical reasons, and the second group consists of theoretical reasons. When we are talking about the theoretical reasons, one of the colleagues mentioned that the constitutional identity is a really popular topic, even in Russia. But we can say that also it is a topic that is popular all around the world. For example, in his most famous book named Constitutional Identity, Gary Jacobson said that constitutional identity is or should be a central issue in a constitutional law. He made this statement in the year when two of the most significant books in the field of constitutional identity were published. One was his, and other was written by Michel Rosenfeld. Interest in constitutional identity has significantly increased in recent years and decades. In a recently published paper, Mark Tushne and Yanni Roznai conducted a small but really interesting research. They entered the term constitutional identity in Google Scholar and tried to find all the papers which deals with the topic of constitutional identity. The starting point, or the first year, was 1950, and the last year is 2023. And what was the results? During the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, we have only a few scientific articles which deals with the concept of constitutional identity. Then in the 1990s, we have a slight increase in the number of scientific papers and books. And then in 2000 and 2010, that is a boom like of papers and books which deals with the topic of constitutional identity. Maybe another proof of this is that everyone sitting in this room and deals with the constitutional law has at least one scientific papers which deals with the topic of constitutional identity. So this clearly testifies the significance of this topic. The second group consists of practical reasons. Many constitutional courts across Europe have begun to use concept of constitutional identity in their proceedings. Certainly the most famous decision is that of the German Constitutional Court from 2009, in which it examined whether the Lisbon Treaty violated the constitutional identity of Germany. The court, in this case, used the notion of constitutional identity in order to protect internal legal order. Also, the Italian Constitutional Court used the term constitutional identity. Of course, there is a case of Hungary that is the most interesting case, because the Hungarian Constitutional Court, in his decision from 2016, perhaps went the furthest in invoking constitutional identity. The court stated that Hungary's constitutional self-identity, they use the term constitutional self-identity, is not a list of static and closed values. Therefore, it was not created by the fundamental law, it was only recognized by it. Thus, for the Hungarian Constitutional Court, the protection of constitutional identity is its duty as long as Hungary remains a sovereign state. And we can observe here that there is a practice among the European constitutional courts. There is a practice where a constitutional court invoke constitutional identity when they want to defend sovereignty. Thus, the constitutional identity serves them as a tool for preserving, for defending sovereignty. This means that a concept meant to signify the highest authority of the state internally, independent of external influences, that is sovereignty, is defended by a theoretical construction that has or should have legal content. Therefore, it is important to make several theoretical clarifications. The concept of constitutional identity is complex, still undefined, even in theory. We do not have any doubt about that. Here I will mention the distinction made by Jose Luis Marti in his paper, who distinguish the identity of the people or the political community under a certain constitution and the identity of the constitution. When we are talking about the identity of the political community, I can cite the Professor Tanasije Marinković, Serbian professor of constitutional law, who said that the term constitutional identity is increasingly used to express the values that define a political community constitute as a state. Constitutional identity in this sense is what distinguishes a political community from other communities, but also what differentiates it from its own pre-constitutional past and from its cultural and national identity. So these are two separate terms, national identity versus constitutional identity. But here we have to notice one important thing. Every identity depends on the identities of others. So every identity can be constituted only when placed in a dialogic context. For example, I cannot talk about my religious identity if I do not put my religious identity in a context with others, with a religious identity of others. So that means that identity does not stand alone, like in a vacuum. In this sense, then, it is possible to distinguish three types of constitutional identity: ethnocentric, civic, and multicultural constitutional identity. Such understanding of constitutional identity as identity of political community under a certain constitution is significant for two reasons. First, or such understanding of constitutional identity can find practical application in the so-called constitutional definitions of the state. And second, it is really important for every country to define its own constitutional identity. For example, Professor Vladan Petrov points out that in a state that has not defined its constitutional model, it is likely that the constitutional issue will remain unresolved. On the other side, if constitutional identity is understood in the second sense as the identity of the constitution, then its origin can be traced back to the 1920s. It could be said that German constitutional legal theory actually created the concept of constitutional identity, primarily through works of Carl Schmitt and Karl Bilfinger. So we can notice that two authors, which we cannot call as a democratic authors, actually invented this term. And the central point here is the question whether there are parts of the constitutions that are unchangeable. Carl Schmitt asked that in the context of Weimar Constitution. This theoretical question originally arose in the context of constitutional revision, where the limitation of constitutional revision, ratione materiae, was justified as necessary for the preservation of the identity, the constitutional identity, we can say. And this raises the key question. Colleague Alexa Nikolic also points out this question: where in the constitutional sphere constitutional identity can be found? While most authors agree that a given country's constitutional identity has some sort of connection to its constitutional documents, there is a considerable disagreement about the exact nature of this relationship. For example, Michel Troper said that identifying a country's constitutional identity is simply a matter of extracting fundamental principles without which the constitution would lose its essential character. So he points out that every constitution has a few key principles, and our task is only to find that key principles. And because of that, Troper means that constitutional identity can only serve as an interpretative guide in constitutional adjudication. That is a tool for the constitutional court. But on the other side, for example, Fletcher argues that the acceptable way to identify constitutional identity is not to examine only the constitutional document, but the content of legal culture. So we can see that after these short theoretical insights, that the constitutional identity is really complex notion, but also it is a dynamic concept. It is not a static concept. Constitutional identity can be changed through the time. Gary Jacobson said, in the end, constitutional identity will be fashioned and refashioned through the struggle over constitutional identity. And that is really, really important point for the case of Serbia, because Jacobson also observes that constitutional disharmony is a critical to the development of constitutional identity, even as it may make more challenging the task of establishing the specific substance of that identity at any given point in time. Japanese author Komamura explains that disharmony is not a distractor, but a driving force for the development of the constitutional identity. So we have an opportunity to define constitutional identity in the time where we have a disharmony in the constitution or in the constitutional practice. I think that Serbia has the problem of being in that condition of disharmony. The central point of constitutional identity in Serbia is undoubtedly contained in the territorial issue. The unresolved territorial status of Kosovo and Metohija is something that prevents Serbia from resolving constitutional questions. And why is that? On one hand, Serbia, due to the absence of the evolutionary development of democratic institutions, an authoritarian past, and nearly half a century of one-party state experience, Serbia was forced to catch up on all the missed elements. As a former communist state with an authoritarian system of government, Serbia turned to international and European law solution to compensate for all the values, human rights, democracy, market economy, and so on. The problem lies in the absence of gradualism. In Western so-called old democracies, constitutionalism was first established, and only later did democracy follow, which was not the case with Serbia. And in this segment, we can see that Serbia did not question its sovereignty. For Serbia, it is normal to foster the idea of internationalization of constitutional law. But on the other hand, sovereignty becomes a central issue for Serbia when it comes to case of Kosovo and Metohija. In short, just to explain the context, as Thomas Fleiner and Lydia Basta-Fleiner explained, nations that were once under the rule of the Austro-Hungarian or Ottoman Empire, including Serbia, developed a specific understanding of the nation and the state, mostly accompanied by the idea of pre-constitutional unity of the people. And what the problem is, here we have a problem of ethno-constitutionalism, because this ethno-constitutionalism was built in opposition to multi-ethnic states, which were generally seen as multi-ethnic prisons. Sorry, I will say in Serbian, we call that here in Serbia, tamnica naroda. It follows that every ethnic nation has the right to establish its own state, but not more than one state. And therefore, the demands of the Kosovo Albanians were considered unjustified, as the Albanians has their own independent ethnic state. This construction managed to hold until the breakup of Yugoslavia, when the people who lived in one state suddenly became minorities and second-class citizens. Then that Pandora's box opened, and we have problems that we have right now. But the question of Kosovo and Metohija is not only the territorial issue. It is actually the central point for constructing Serbia's constitutional identity. I will try to show you that on the example of the Serbian constitution. Article 2 of the Constitution of Serbia from 2006 says that sovereignty derives from citizens, so from all citizens in Serbia. On the other hand, in the Article 1 of the Constitution, it is said that Serbia is a state, we will underline this, of all Serbs and other who lives in Serbia, other people who lives in Serbia. Also, the preamble of the Constitution states, starting from the state tradition of the Serbian people and the equality of all citizens and ethnic communities in Serbia. it is clear that the constitution predominantly actually defines Serbia as a nation state, one that was created and exists to express and promote the interest of one nation, a dominant nation. However, this is a different orientation compared to the Constitution of Serbia from 1990, because in that constitution, Serbia was defined as a state of all citizens living in it, without identifying ethnic Serbs as a special category. This is evidence that Serbia has not made a fundamental decision about the nature of its constitutional identity. So, on the one hand, Serbia builds its constitutional identity on the basis of accepting the process of internationalization of constitutional law, while on the other hand, when it comes to Kosovo and Metohija, it invokes sovereignty and tries to clearly separate internal from international issues. But such a state of disharmony that maybe exists in the constitution, I think can actually lead to final definition of constitutional identity. But this should not be done by defending sovereignty through constitutional identity, but by clearly defining what are the key points from the past that bind future generations and what the program for the future is. That is something that I think colleague Korolko said. Only the connection of the past, of the present, and the future plans can finally define what constitutes constitutional identity in the case of Serbia. Thank you very much for
Alexander. Alexander, thank you so much for your presentation. And now, if you promise to me, I want to give my question for you. Is it possible? What do you think about so idea? Maybe the idea of constitutional identity appears as a reflection of huge crisis of sovereignty. What do you think about it, idea?
Well, thank you very much. I think that actually the notion of constitutional identity is highly misused in the context of the crisis of sovereignty. So we have a lot of states that can invoke the notion of constitutional identity in order to defend their sovereignty. But what the problem is with that construction? The problem is that then the constitutional identity will remain a concept with any value for the constitutional law. I think that the constitutional identity can help us to understand what our goals is as a state. For example, in the case of Serbia, what are the goals of Serbia? What Serbia wants from the future based on previous experiences, based on the experiences from the past. And after that, the constitutional identity can help us, can help at the first place, can help to the constitutional court of Serbia or any other state to better understand what the constitutional identity is. And for example, I can mention one example from Croatia. When we are talking about constitutional identity, we are always talking about the sovereignty. And then we have a problem with that because everyone can say, okay, our constitutional identity is Kosovo, for example, and we need to save Kosovo under any conditions. But for example, some other can say, no, we do not need Kosovo, we need to be the part of the European Union. So our constitutional identity is based on the European values, and that is the problem. But for example, in the Croatia, when they have a problem with some legal acts, disharmony in internal legal order, they try to understand what the constitutional identity was. The Croatia said this is our constitutional identity, and we, for example, in the process of constitutional adjudication, can say that this act is in the harmony with the Constitution. And just to give a context, that was the act about, I think, the higher education. So that was not the question about the sovereignty. That was the question about the harmonization of internal legal order, to better understanding of the internal legal order. And of course, you know, why I don't think that it is a good idea to invoke the constitutional identity when it comes to sovereignty, because then the constitutional identity can be misused, and then every single country can create the constitutional identity in the way that it fits into the dominant ideas of the political elites in the present time.
Thank you so much,
So I
Alexander.
hope that I try to answer, but I'm absolutely here to clarify maybe my answers to your question.
Hello, thank you again for an interesting presentation. I have a couple of questions for you. Can you hear me?
Be louder.
Oh, nice. So can you say that the whole concept of constitutional national identity is somehow artificial? So, for instance, on the one hand, it described the uniqueness and how the mentioned culture is different to another one. At the same time, this description is being done with the same words, with the very idea of constitution, with the similar structures of constitutional bodies, and the whole idea of constitution itself, and the very word constitution the same everywhere. But how they are different in that case?
I'm really sorry. I understood the first part. I heard well the first part of your question, but I did not hear the second part of your question. I'm really sorry.
So I will repeat the whole question if you don't mind. All right, can you hear me now? All right, so my question was, can the whole concept of national or constitutional identity be regarded or be deconstructed as artificial? So I claim that from the one hand, the very concept of constitutional identity describes the difference of one culture to another culture, right? And from the other hand, these descriptions being done with the same words, with the same concepts, with the very idea of constitution applies everywhere. The very idea of constitutional identity can be found everywhere. Even the state bodies are pretty much similar. How they're different then, if it's the same structure everywhere?
Okay. Yeah, thank you for your question. I hear now. Okay, well, first, I just want to underline that I don't think that there is something that we can call national constitutional identity. I think that national identity and constitutional identity is two separate things. I put that in brackets because of that. So the national identity is something that we are using in the constitutional law, of course, in the constitutional theory. It is really important for us, but constitutional identity, I think, is primarily a legal concept. When you're asking if there is constitutional identity an artificial concept, well, on the one hand, yes, because of course it is created by the theory in order to defend some ideas. But on the other hand, I don't think that is necessarily that thing. So I actually think that we can use the constitutional identity if we are using the constitutional identity in the right way. But if I understood the second part of your question, constitutional identity is not cannot only be found in in the how to say in the shaping of the constitutional bodies. Okay, the constitutional court is something that every country have, and or the other side, some other institutions we have. But okay, and all the other, for example, European countries have the same institutions. But that is not, how to say, that is not bad for the constitutional identity, because the constitutional identity is not only the institutions in the way that that institution is shaped in the constitution. That is the idea of the previous ideas of the previous generation. For example, in my master thesis, I tried to find where the what the points from the past we can use in the present and in the future. And for example, the Serbia can take a lot of her past from the 19th century, because in the 19th century, Serbia started to foster the democratic ideas, the democratic institutions, and so on. But also, Serbia, the first constitutional court in Serbia is established during the socialist regime in 1963. And also, the very, very important point, for example, Serbia in formal sense is a republic from 1946, and the constitution from 2006 is in a formal sense actually come as or the constitution of Serbia from 2006 is adopted by accepting the revisional norms from the constitution from 1990. And the constitution from 1990 is adopted by accepting the revisional norms from the constitution from 1974, from the socialist time. So we can catch the elements from our past, even from the socialist past, even from the liberal past, and so on. So the constitutional identity, yes, it is artificial concept, but that artificial concept is not only we cannot found that elements of that concept only in the constitutions, but also in the past. I said that we can use the constitutional identity in the right, in a proper way, only if we have agreement as a society what our past is and what our future needs to be, what we want from our future, what Serbia wants from her future. We need to know that in order to define our constitutional identity. So I hope that I answered your question, but of course, please.
Alexander, thank you so much. And Vasily, next question for us, prepare.
Well, thank you very much for your expanded answer on the first one. I do doubt that we can talk about the whole society agreed on the certain visions of past or future, etc. But the second one is a small clarification, though. You mentioned that identity can be understood only in context when you compare to one another. And so the question is, if I accept this logic and move forward, then can I say that this identity only exists to justify the difference between the cultures? Otherwise, it has no sense.
Okay. Okay. I understood you. If I understood you well, and please correct me if I'm not, because we have these technical problems. Well, so we are sure now that our next conference needs to be in person, in Belgrade or in Moscow, in order to understand better each other. But if I understood, yes, I said that any identity, even national identity, can be constructed only with the other identities. What that means, if I understood you well, your question is, can we talk about the constitutional identity if we have a homogeneous society? If that was the question.
No, the question was
just a second.
Basically, if you can understand identity only in comparison to other identity, what is the point of having one if only to justify the difference between two or three or whatever? So it only serves as a means to differentiate. So not really explains.
Okay, yes, I said that, and I think that constitutional identity says only in the case where we can talk about the how to say different constitutional identity. Basically, the idea which I wanted to present is that every country, every single country has a constitutional identity because every country has or some past or some traditions or so on. Of course, I'm pretty aware of the fact that we are living in the world where we do not know even what the borders of the countries is. We have many separatist movements which want to construct their own constitutional identity in order to defend their positions. But of course, that constitutional identity can be constructed only if there are other constitutional identities. But I didn't mean in one state, but the constitutional identity of other states. Basically, the idea which I want to present is actually when we are talking about the European Union, for example, of course that every country of the European Union has their own constitutional identity. And of course that there is a need for every country to protect their own constitutional identity. The question, does Hungary or Poland or Germany do that in a right way? That is a second question. That is a question of constitutional politics. That is a political question, not necessarily a legal question. But of course, that every country has their own constitutional identity. Even in the Treaty of the Functioning of the European Union, it is said, in the Treaty of the European Union, it is said that European Union has to protect, or how to say, to foster, to respect the identity of every member state. That is the fundamental idea of the European Union. That is the legal idea. That is the legal idea. What is the current situation, or what will be the situation in a few years? That is a matter of politics. And of course, that is an important question. But that we need to discuss a lot about that, to include extra legal elements.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alexander. But Vadim want to give you some question. Yep. Is it possible?
Yes, of course, please.
Thank you, Professor Cvetkovic. When we talk about constitutional identity, we usually mean a number of differences, exceptions. So I have a question. Do you see any material limit to constitutionalism? In other words, how do you balance constitutional identity as an exception and the constitutionalism as a general rule? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Again, I need to say, I hope that I heard you well, but when it comes to that, what parts of constitutions are unamendable, which cannot be changed, if that was the question, material restrictions in constitution. When we are talking about that, of course, the most famous case is that of Germany, because Germany has that eternity clause in their in constitution. And of course, Germany, in the moment when the constitution was adopted, Germany said, okay, that parts of the constitution cannot be changed. These are the core elements of our state, of our nation, of our constitution. Serbia does not have that kind of material restrictions. But I am not sure. I think that maybe it is a good idea. It is a good idea, theoretically a good idea, to have some material restrictions if there is some kind of, how to say, consensus in a society that we have some values that we cannot change. Okay, but to my students and the practical work, I always give an example of Greece, because I think that that was the constitution from the 1920s. In the Greek constitution, it was said Greek is a monarchy and that cannot be changed never. And then just a few years later, Greece became a republic. So there is a phenomenon of constitutional revolution, of where we have a practice of revision of constitution, not by accepting the revisional norms of the constitution, but by the constitutional revolution. So we have that examples, of course. We have an example of Hungary. For example, Hungary in the beginning of 90s changed the whole constitution, but it was done in that way that it was the revision of the socialist constitution, but okay, in the material sense, it was the whole new constitution. I think that maybe that is a good idea, but it is not a good idea to have in the constitution material restraints if there is no agreement, if there is no consensus in the society, what are the key elements? Maybe every state can say, okay, we want to protect the human rights and we need to protect the human rights. I think that is a civilizational question. You know, I hope that every country understand that the protection of the human rights is a necessary thing for every constitution, okay? But that question is, without any doubt, the question we have consensus all in the society. But that is not the problem. For example, in the Serbian constitution from 2006, it is said that when we want to change our constitution, we cannot go down with the level of the constitutional right. We can go only above, you know. Okay, that is not the problem. But I'm not sure that at this moment, for example, in Serbia, we can say that the norms on territorial autonomy, or, for example, on the status of Kosovo and Metohija, is the elements that we have a consensus in the society. So it is good to put that kind of material restraints in the constitution, but only in the case if we know as a society, as a whole, which parts needs to be unamendable.
Thank you so much. Now, list of speakers of our dialogue is over, but maybe somebody won't say some words about constitutionalism. Else, somebody want?
Okay, Professor Vladan Petrov. Wow. Okay.
Dear colleagues, I will not. Sorry. Dear colleagues, I will not ask another question or further or deepen the discussion. I think that we had a very fruitful and very intensive work today. And I would like to say some closing remarks, if you don't mind. First of all, I want to give a special thanks to our colleague, Yegor, to say that he is here in Belgrade very serious, proactive, and very important part of our Serbian team of constitutional lawyers. You should know that. And second, I want to say special thanks to several of our students from the first first year of our basic studies, because it was very, I think, very hard for them to understand all of those different questions and topics which were raised and analyzed today. Finally, I want to to express my belief that we will be together in vivo very soon in Belgrade or in Moscow to organize one really serious scientific conference on specific topics and to have some more pauses to make some informal discussions, because they are generally more fruitful than those which are formal in one room, if you agree with me. So once again, I want to thank all of you and to wish you a good cooperation. And just one question, please. Is there any possibility to make in the future some papers from this conference, maybe to be collected in some way here in Serbia, if you want, or in your paper, scientific paper in Moscow, scientific article? Is it possible, or it will be only the oral conference as a first step? This is, of course, for the organizers, because it would be very, very nice to have some materialization of these topics and this discussion, maybe to collect them in some way.
Yes, of course, Professor Vlad Vakovich, Vladimir Petrov, yes, we can prepare these papers for you, and I think that it is possible. Your idea is brilliant. We publish these texts.
Because they do not need to be scientifically prepared with all those footnotes and everything else, but some material results of this first conference, which can be traditional in a way. So I am very glad that you understand our question. So thank you once again. I don't want to be longer than I was already. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe some for us want to say about results of conference. Vadim, some words for Vadim about results of conference. I think that it is a great step on the way to each other. It's a great result for our discussion, and I hope that my friend Vadim now says about his reaction about our discussion today.
Thank you, Irina Pavlovna. I thank the honored colleagues from both sides for their excellent reports and informative discussion. The relevance of our event is enhanced by the relevance of the chosen topics, which can be called significant not for our country, Russia and Serbia, but also for entire legal science. The problems of modern constitutionalism, as it was shown, cover not only traditional issues for constitutionalism. It would be more correct to say that new tasks give us to rethink constitutionalism again and again in the context of modern technologies and international situation. Therefore, I'm happy to state that our conference today was a big step forward in the discussion between our countries, in the discussion about internal questions, which the new conditions acquire new significance. I hope that this communication will continue and the friendship between our faculties as well between our peoples will grow stronger. Thank you very much, dear colleagues.
Thank you for fruitful dialogue. Best for you.